I'm Dave.
And I'm Sean.
Together we are Barstools
and Bandtalk. And we pumped this one up. I tell you, we were just chatting with this gentleman. What a cool dude. This guy needs no introduction. Well, I'm just going to do a quick little. Yeah. I'm on his website right now, and this guy, Todd Story. Todd Kerns is a multi-instrumentalist singer, songwriter, and producer. He's most noted for playing bass and backup with Slash, featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators. So if you go on his website, you'll see more. Guys played with Alice Cooper, Lemmy, Slash, Rick Nielsen, Duff McKagan, Adam Levine. And he's a good old Canadian boy. So I'm really excited about this.
Yeah. We're going to bring him on because, and he's also got a great talk show too. There's lots of things we're going to talk about. It's just going to be a real blast. So we're looking forward to bringing him on here now. Please welcome to our show, Mr. Todd. Dammit, Kerns. I love his middle name. Now I got to ask you, Todd, is that your real middle name now?
Yeah, it's one of those crazy things that just sort of really caught on. The funniest thing was relocating to the States. At which point did I? So yeah, it's been 14 years. I think I was telling you this month. And the interesting thing was relocating as just this Todd guy from Canada. As far as the American people were, having whatever history I had in Canada didn't mean anything down here. So the weird thing was that an old nickname caught on. And oddly enough, it was guys like Vinnie Paul from Pantera, who we lost a couple years back. He loved that nickname. He would yell at casinos, "Damn it!" And I'd be like, In fact, people would go like, "Yeah, Todd Kerns was here tonight." He wouldn't know who you were talking about. He's like, he only knew Todd Dammit. So Todd Dammit it's the classic, Johnny Rotten, or any of the old punk rockers just add some silly name to the end of your name, and Todd Dammit rhymes with a curse, Toddzilla, things like that. So it just became kind of,
Right on. So a funny little story for you, Todd. We're in Halifax. I moved to Toronto in '93. I was there for about 7 years. First night that I'm there, we go to the RPM. You remember that club?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I go in thinking we're up there doing some stuff for the record company, and we see a little old band called Age of Electric playing at the RPM. Yeah, that was my first band that I saw in Toronto, and I remember going. I actually left the press because I'm like, if that's the freaking bar where the bar's at, we're in freaking trouble here, boys.
Really?
You guys were great. That was '93, so that would have been Ugly. That album.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, '93 was the. I was just talking about this the other day because we recorded the Ugly EP. Technically, we moved out to Vancouver around '92, I think. Bob Rock, the producer, Metallica, Motley Crue, the list goes on. He had seen us play in one of our trips to Vancouver and said, "I want to record you guys." And we were like, "What, like us? The band that's been rolling across the prairies that no one cares about?" So we went, okay. And we moved out to Vancouver. Then we made that record at Little Mountain Studios, where they did AC/DC and Aerosmith and Bon Jovi and Motley Crue. And we were in this little tiny studio over in the corner, and Bob was working on Keep the Faith by Bon Jovi in the big room. And then he would come over every now and again and direct traffic and then go back to his real gig, you know what I mean? So we ended up recording a whole bunch of material, and, the intention was to get signed and then go on and, live in limousines and 5-star hotels. None of that happened.
What?
Yeah. So we ended up recording, because we never got signed, we ended up having the manager we briefly had was involved with Bon Jovi indirectly, and we went to New York. We had those meetings with label people and all this stuff, and a lot of promising things. And we were really bold. Like, we were really kind of like, we want to get signed out of the States. We want to get signed, because as Canadians, we all knew all of our heroes were Canadian bands that a lot of other people never heard of. You know what I mean? Like, I put a band together, Touque, based around that entire idea. of these bands that we love, that we grew up with. But we thought, well, we can do this independently in Canada. We've been around long enough that we could probably continue our independent career. And that's exactly what we did. Is after doing this dance with these different labels and nothing really happening, we said, well, let's take 5 of these songs. It might have been 6 songs. It's all a blur now. And around 93, we released the Ugly EP. And in 95, we ended up releasing a full-length version with 2 songs, Ugly and Untitled, from the EP. So yeah, around 93, we were out there kind of trying to do the original band hustle, because we had started as a cover band in the prairies, where it was you got a lot of work playing cover bars.
Yeah.
And which was really fun and really good for us, because we played on stage for 3 sets a night for 6 nights a week. And we really got good as a band. We got real tight. We got real comfortable being on stage. And then around, that started to dry up, and we decided, let's go to the coast and become an original band, a real band. And then we had to get like jobs and stuff.
It was a good time though. I mean, the early 90s in Vancouver, it was a happening spot for sure.
Well, Canada in general, it's like, it was a real hot spot of, a lot of great music came out in the 90s in Canada. It's like, Halifax had a huge thing. The Sloan guys were massive. And, Vancouver had Moist, the Matthew Good Band. We had a bunch of that. Then Toronto had all like I Mother Earth and R.W. Peace and the Tea Party. And so it was a really, really fervent time of a lot of music and the Canadian music scene was pretty on fire with the Edge Fest and all those different concerts that were happening that were really you have a band like Our Lady Peace is headlining, and then underneath them is like Green Day or like Foo Fighters. You know what I mean? It was like, that's how big the Canadian music scene was.
You ever chat with some of your American friends about that, like Canadian, like, and they'll have like a blank look on their face. And I'll give you an example. A number of years ago, Kid Rock, when he was dating Pamela Anderson, was on Much Music, and he was making a joke about who the heck is that April Wine band. He had no idea.
Really?
He did. Which
wow.
We talked to a bunch of American friends, and they seem to have known April Wine. But you ever have a chat with any of your buds down there, and they're kind of like giving you this blank look, like they've never heard of these bands before?
Of course. Well, we started this band called Touque. It's myself, Brent Fitz, who plays drums in Slash's band, Corey Churko, who plays guitar for Shania Twain. He plays with Kelly Clarkson. And then Shane Gallus is a friend of ours who played drums with Yngwie Malmsteen, Michael Schenker, and this Japanese band called the Bees. And they're all transplanted Canadian guys, actually prairie guys, all living down here, playing in international acts. You know what I mean? But we all grew up on the same stuff: Harlequin, Street Heart, April Wine, Loverboy, all that stuff. And we would be, every time we get together, because it's the classic example of nobody is more Canadian than a Canadian not living in Canada.
Oh,
you go over to their house. And it's all, hey, like they got April Wine cranked up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm familiar with April Wine. I but every time you go over, it's kind of like they're serving up Canadian music, like it's a rarity or something like. So for us, it was like all this music that we grew up on, and we loved, but we kind of thought to ourselves, wouldn't it be weird, like to kind of like to like how much we love this music, but someone from not only the States, but South America, Japan, Australia, they wouldn't be familiar with this song that we love by this band. And so we ended up doing these charity gigs in Winnipeg, and someone had the idea, I think Brent Fitz had the idea of like, let's just play all Canadian music, Kim Mitchell, like all that kind of stuff, Aldo Nova. And we decided to, that's what we did. So we kind of took it as a challenge. Corey Hart, you can just like, the list goes on. It really goes on.
Oh yeah.
And then we started and then Corey everybody kind of has their own home studio situation. So we started recording versions of these songs for our own amusement, because we thought, wouldn't it be cool if somebody in South America says, I love that song that, that you guys recorded. And I go, that's a Saga song. You would never have heard that song if we hadn't, so. Yeah. It was really fun for us, and you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of it's funny because we've turned on a lot of our friends in our circle, where we're like, just the other day we were over at a friend of ours house, and he plays he just always puts on super deep Canadian cuts, Coney Hatch, you know, the Queen City Kids. And the one guitar player from Slash's band, who's born and raised in Las Vegas, is like, is this you know, he'll know this, he'll kind of ask, like, I'm like, there's no way he would be aware of this band if it wasn't for this Canadian, you know, circle that he thought.
Right.
And it's a deep, you know, it's a deep dive and a deep dig on a lot of great music that is just lost to a giant chunk of the world.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
On that note, I mean, so we'll wind up getting some of these gigs because, I mean, like, you know, you're a guy from Canada, and everybody knows when you're Canadian, like, you know, Sebastian Bach gets there and whatever, but it's tough. It's tough to, you know, break in there. And I mean, I'm looking at some of the names that you played with, and I mean, it's not a couple of people, it's a whole series of people. So I'm thinking, A, you know your stuff. B, you probably have to be a pretty good guy that people want to, you know, call up like you're a pro, I would think. But how did that start for you?
Well, there is a certain amount of the, you know, the 10,000 hours conversation, you know, that whole thing about, what do they say? You know, you have to kind of be prepared for any opportunity because it's all, you know, these things come up and if you're not really ready for them. But I mean, a lot of it, honestly, like when I came down to Vegas and Los Angeles, really, it wasn't like it was a plan. I didn't come down here with this sort of like, looking for a gig, you know what I mean? I'd always been a songwriter and I'd always been the front guy, singing my own songs or singing songs that I'd written with the guys. And then, you know, and then I kind of like at that later chapter, I thought to myself, because it was a weird time there in the 2000s when things got, you know, downloading and all that kind of stuff had, you know, as much as it affected the music industry, it really took its toll on the Canadian run. I remember like at one point me and my friends were talking about like Edgefest concerts and saying, you know, all those bands that I mentioned, like I Mother Earth and Moist and Tea Party, at the time I mentioned all those bands, every one of them didn't exist. There was a brief window of time where they had all kind of gone away because it just became challenging to have a career in the Canadian music industry. And you know, rather than I just, a couple opportunities came up and I found my way down here. And then it was really a case of just sort of, you know, you kind of put yourself in a situation to be like, you know, just sort of seeing what's out there, what kind of opportunities present themselves. And I came down here and I started playing with Brent Muscat from Faster Pussycat, and we went to Europe, and we put together a fun jam band here in town. Stuff going on, people coming through, and we just ended up jamming. Brent Fitz, our drummer from Winnipeg, he got the gig first, and he just sort of like connected the dots with me, and that sort of turned into that. So it really is like, it seems like there's a grand plan in place when you see it on paper, but it always feels sort of like you're just sort of like, you pull your paddle out of the water and just let the canoe take you wherever it's going to take you sometimes. And it's sort of what happened, you know, within, you know, putting yourself in positions of where the opportunities can present themselves,
Right.
But you still have to be ready to capitalize on that opportunity. Otherwise, it's not really an opportunity at all. You know what I mean?
I appreciate what you said there, Todd, because, you know, when we've talked to a lot of folks, and, you know, the whole consensus always seems to be, oh, I was just lucky. I was just fortunate. And it's not luck because you did the work ahead of time. You know, like without question, you were prepared for when the opportunity arose. You know, and to move down to the States, yeah, it makes sense. Especially at that time, there was really not much else going on in Canada for sure. And we all know if you want to make it to a grand scheme of things, there's 10 times the population down there than there is up here. So, I mean, your opportunities are tenfold, right?
Well, it's one of those things that honestly, like I never would have left, you know what I mean? Like there's like, I talk to my friends in bands like Nickelback or whoever, and I go, well, I wish it had kind of gone that way for me, where I still had it just went that way and I still live in Vancouver or wherever and I can still have this career. But, you know, for me, it was like, you know, really getting the opportunity to kind of go and, you know, you kind of have to put yourself in a position to really challenge yourself. And I kind of recommend almost taking yourself out of your comfort zone. Because I grew up in Saskatchewan, and I probably could have stayed there and been in the biggest band in Saskatoon. I know. And then, the idea was to like take it to Calgary, and then take it to Winnipeg, and then take it to Edmonton, and then take it to, work your way to Toronto, work your way to Vancouver, and just like, you really got to get out there, because you realize there's a lot of big fish in small, ponds, and I'm okay with that. Like I think there's nothing wrong with sort of being like, comfortable wherever you are, but I think I've always sort of wanted to see what else is out there and wanted to push myself. And, I find myself down here and it's just very fertile opportunity type situations. A lot of gigs, a lot of people looking for players, and, it's not for everybody. I mean, I imagine if I love places like Nashville. If I put myself there, other opportunities would present themselves. I put myself in New York, different opportunities, maybe not quite as lucky as some places, but it's just, you really kind of have to. And it's funny because Fitz is a lot more this way than me. Like, I'm kind of like, I would have been happy to stay in Vancouver or in Canada and do my thing. And he's a lot more like, you have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to put yourself where the action is. And I suppose there is something to be said about that. Yeah. Los Angeles, Nashville, there's a lot going on down there. And if you're a musician, why wouldn't, it's like being an actor. You should probably go to Los Angeles. That's where the films and the TV and, that kind of stuff, unless you want to be in theater, and then you go to New York City. So it is really about, like you say, you have to be prepared for it. You can't just show up in Los Angeles and say, I'm ready to be a movie star. It's like, you probably should have done some acting before you got here or whatever. Right. So it's the same thing with everything else. When you go to places like Nashville, you realize that the guy just parking cars over there is one of the best guitar players you will ever hear. It's like, so when you show up, you're like, well, I probably should show up there with some preparation and readiness for this.
Well, in Toronto, everybody had an attitude in Toronto. Like the guy that was sweeping the floors at the gasworks to the, it was really funny. But they used to do this Sunday night jam that was really cool, and that's where you used to, get networked with people. You go in there, you'd see amazing players. There'd be all kinds of opportunities. Is there a similar sort of thing that maybe takes place down in your neck of the woods, or you just getting the calls? Like, how's it working out for you? Because again, you're doing a bit of an aw shucks thing here, Todd, but I mean, you don't get calls. Well, you don't get calls from these folks. Like, they're going to call you because I think obviously you're prepared and you're pro, but how do you just keep your name out there when you keep doing it and just keep in everybody's wheelhouse?
Well, I think it usually is all connected to, the gig that got your name out there. You know what I mean? Like, so when stuff like Slash presents itself, it just creates an opportunity of like, well, you know what it's like. It's like if that's attached to your name, there's an immediate sort of like, oh, okay, well then this guy clearly is, he's done this, so he must be qualified to be, to be involved in whatever else is going on. So, and that's, I've known a way more talented people than me did, and to shucks my way into a corner here. But I've known a lot of like super talented people, way more talented than me, who it just wasn't, it's not that it wasn't for them. It's just that maybe the opportunities of like, because there's a great deal of sacrifice that goes along with this kind of stuff. It's not just kind of like, well, I bought a guitar and an amp, I'm ready, where's my record deal? It's sort of like, oh, are you willing to, travel across the country in a van that may not make it? You're probably going to break down. You're probably going to sit in the snow. You're probably going to have to sleep on people's floors. You're probably going to have to play to people who don't care. We played to all kinds of prairie towns with like oil rig working guys who with their backs turned to us, like just did not care. Like we just happened to be like this noise. But I always equated to the Beatles in like Hamburg. The Beatles were like, they were a band, and then they went to Hamburg and played 5 sets a night or whatever it was, and they came back a million times the band that they were when they got there, because they just got real serious, and I think they had to cut their teeth on like a lot of, because there's certain guys that go out into kind of environment who come out of that and go, this is 100% not for me. I'm going to take that job or marry my high school sweetheart and the end, you know? And then there's other guys that go out into that lifestyle. They realize that they are pirates or outlaws, and they go, this is 100% for me. And I was one of those guys. Like, I was like, you know, we would pay ourselves something like $100 a week if we could. And you would get clever with like a loaf of bread and like, you know, peanut butter and whatever, and just kind of be able to travel around and buy a meal a day or something, you know, and survive. And a lot of people would be like, are you crazy? I'm not doing that. You know, it's like, and I knew all kinds of guys that dropped off to go to college and go do this and go do that. And I was like, you know, and I'm never the guy who goes like, oh, what a coward, you know, what a wimp, you know. Like, I understand how crazy it is, and how, you know, for guys like me who just kept going and going, isn't this great? You know, like it was cool to me, like getting to play on stage. You could have not paid me, but just got me in a van and put a you know, Happy Meal in me the next day to go play the next town. I'd have been happy as a clam. And that's basically the same attitude I have now, really. I mean, of course, you become an adult and you have mortgages and responsibilities, but it's sort of the same idea in that I still really enjoy it. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things to not enjoy about if you lose that romance with the life, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it is a lifer thing, because a lot of guys, even as they get older, they start to get kind of like, well, what's in it? You know, how does this work? Whatever. And of course, there's always sort of like when someone asks you if you want to go play a gig, you have to be an adult and go, well, what does it pay? And what is this? And what is that?
What's the medical coverage? What's the pension plan? Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Although in reality, you know, that's just responsible adult stuff. If you've got a decent paying gig, you don't say to yourself, I'm going to throw all that to go do this other thing. Unless, of course, you know, I've always said there's so many factors in when a gig comes to you, you kind of go, well, it's got to be A, really fun, B, really good for my career, or C, it just pays so well I can't say no to it. You know what I mean? If you're lucky enough to have all three of those things in the one gig, then you've lucked out. You know, otherwise, there's all kinds of times I play just because it's going to be a blast with these guys, or this one pays really well, or that one's great for connections. But you know, I love playing music so much that I feel very fortunate that I can say I've not really ever had gigs where I've just been like, I hate these guys. I hate this. I don't want to do this. You know, and I think that's a big part of it, because it's interesting when you bring up the attitudes. You're always going to have scenes are always going to have attitudes, and you know, we all face that in or another. But I think a lot of us, these nice Canadian boys, come down here and like, oh wow, you know, cool, fun, you know, that kind of thing. So, and they're all trying to like stake our claim, you know, hold on to our thing. And I found a lot of those attitudes were just insecurities being covered up with some sort of thing, you know.
Well, and I tell you, we used to go see Phil X play at this park called the Artful Dodger, which is just around the corner from the Gasworks, and it was probably about 4 times the room that I'm in right now. Phil was always such an amazingly nice guy. Yeah, talented as hell, but just such a nice guy. And I always remember thinking, like, okay, there's a guy that obviously knows he's talented, but he's not an idiot. No. And that just stuck with me. And I'm getting that vibe from you too. I mean, like, you're, you know, truthfully, and I'm not going to say I'm surprised, but you're very laid back. And for a guy that's kind of, you know, been at the level that you are, I'd expect, you know, maybe a little bit more of a, you know, I don't want to answer that question. So.
Yeah. No eye contact.
Yeah.
No, it's funny because I just did a session with Phil a month ago. We talk quite regularly because he's got a new Bon Jovi record out. So I said, I just watched you on iHeartRadio. The bass player is a really good friend too, Hugh. And you know, it's interesting to see guys like Phil. You understand how he kind of like rises to a level, because he is, first of all, it's one thing to be a nice guy. You could be a nice guy and not that talented, or you could be really talented and an asshole, but he just happens to be really talented and a wonderful guy to work with. So that's why things present themselves, you know. So I'm not saying that guys like Phil or even guys like me can't be difficult in our own ways. everybody has things that they, you know, I'm not doing that, whatever it is, you know, I can't imagine off the top of my head exactly what it is, but there, you know, it just happens. But it might be a Canadian thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it might be, but I feel pretty fortunate that a lot of the guys that I deal with out of Nashville and even Los Angeles, you would think Los Angeles might be more troublesome in some ways, but so many of them are just good dudes. And I think maybe just kind of like there are certain personalities that just kind of like, you go, okay, well, that's not for me. So you don't really mix with those guys, but you mix with the kind of guys that are at the same frequency in a way.
Right.
And I feel like I'm surrounded by a lot of good people that way. So it's unfortunate that you're going to find there are difficult people, friends who like who have had gigs that were really tough, like tough gigs. That guy's a handful, or might have been an alcohol problem, or whatever it is. It's sort of, I've been very fortunate that way. So
I want to ask you a little bit
well,
about
and you know, and
go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, we're connecting with Norma. She's fantastic. I mean, there's somebody right there that's doing a great job for you. So when you got people with like that working for you, it makes it a little bit easier.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's all been sort of grassroots that way. You know what I mean? It's like as everything grows, but you still have the people with you who've been there when it was nothing. You know, so I mean, she's amazing that way as far as being able to kind of like, you know, handle everything when it was, you know, not that much to handle till when it's sort of more and more challenging, and more people kind of involved to help too. But still, it feels good to me to kind of look around and still see the same faces that have been here for, you know, 15, 20 years now.
I wanted to ask, if you don't mind, a little bit about the gear. So I see some of your guitars behind you now. I see, looks like a Hofner bass. I see the Eddie Van Halen guitar. So what do you, and you have your own line, is that right, of products? Oh,
yeah. If you look at, that's Johnny Ramone, Eddie Van Halen, Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, and Paul McCartney. And it goes on from there. Just all my you know, it's an obsession, really. It's actually been curtailed a lot, but I just love guitars as much as toys, you know what I mean? Like where a lot of guys might buy cars and boats and jet skis, I just buy guitars because I love them. But yeah, I designed my own models based a lot on the idea of what I do with Slash. I found I play this, I play that. I like elements of this but this doesn't work, but this has that, but it doesn't have the other thing that I like. So I found myself I'm also 6'4", so I found what a lot of the guitars, like I love Les Paul Juniors and things like that, and they look like ukuleles on me. So I kind of always gravitated towards bigger and bigger guitars, a lot of hollow bodies, a lot of like the Flying V's and the Explorers and the Firebirds, those kind of things. So the basses that I ended up designing with a company out of Vancouver called Prestige were old friends of mine. Right from the beginning, I met them very early on, probably 20 years ago now, maybe more, I don't know. And then I just sort of, you know, started designing my own ideas and my own pieces. And then it started as a bass. And then the Slash went back to Guns N' Roses. So just when I was getting ready to release the bass as a piece, I suddenly was kind of like not living in my bass player world. So we designed the 6-string, which is a kind of offset Firebird, Thunderbird influence, and we took it to NAMM, you know, the Anaheim Music Convention. And we got a platinum award from Guitar World magazine.
Nice.
Which was totally exciting. Like, I mean, for a guy like me, because I'm not a shredder, I'm not an Eddie Van Halen. I didn't sit in my basement like learning up. I was kind of the guy who just put a guitar out and go and play. But I've always been obsessed with, even as a kid, like just like staring at like the Sears catalog guitar section, you know, whatever you could find. And then later on turned into guitar magazines and just like, you know, sketching guitars on notebooks and whatnot when I should have been doing homework. Yeah, so everybody from like the Rick Nielsen's and the Billy Gibbons, the guys who were really adventurous, you know, because obviously they had Les Pauls and Strats and more normal, but they also went like into different, more adventurous type things. And that's sort of always been kind of where I'm at. So I find myself sort of every now and then I'll flow into a mode of just wanting to find the most radical misfit toys, guitars, and then all of a sudden finding my way back to like, hey, this Fender Precision bass through an Ampeg, it's an equation that has always worked. So we find ourselves kind of like, you know, like having this crazy guitar through this weird boutique amp, and then working your way back to a Les Paul through a Marshall and going, hey, this is awesome. It's like, well, there's a reason it's awesome, because it's been that way since 1950, whatever, you know? And so, yeah, it's a lifelong obsession and a lifelong passion. You know, I mean, I think that I know that, I mean, I can imagine someday like just liquidating everything and deciding to downsize and probably having like 3 to 10 amazing guitars, you know what I mean? That I just like drew, because, you know, every day you get up and I have them in the living room, I have them set up here, I have them all over the house, and they're just sort of set up to be played. You know, you walk out, pick up a guitar and play, and you sort of, every day you have a new introduction to the same thing you fell in love with when the very first time you picked up a guitar.
Right on. I get it.
I love the I love the name. I think that the name is very, very cool. The Anti-Star.
The Anti-Star is started as a well, it's actually, the funniest thing about it is in a Sex Pistols documentary I was watching where Sid Vicious says about Johnny Rotten, he says Johnny Rotten is an anti-star. And I thought it was the most, you know, like the complete, like, and the way he was saying it was like, you know, he's not polished, and he's not, you know, he's not like, if for that time and place, punk rock was so coming out of, I suppose, you know, progressive rock, or even like disco, perhaps. I'm not even sure. Yeah. But to me, the anti-star thing kind of, because I always kind of try to live this life of like, I've never liked the term fans, even though I'm a massive fan of, you know, just today I was obsessing over with my friend about like Paul McCartney's McCartney 3 is coming out right away. And we're like out about trying to find this special vinyl version and all. And it's basically obsessed music fan stuff. Yeah. I always refer to the people that follow what I do, my friends, you know what I mean? And you really do become, you really, even like in an online sense, even though you don't, you know, you kind of cross paths with people. But I do feel like it's sort of, I appreciate people who you know, they follow what you do and all that kind of stuff. But it kind of has always weirded me out, the idea that, you know, like I've never thought of myself as better than anybody just because I play guitar and sing some songs, and they might have seen me in a big place. Because I am always very aware that at any given moment I could be in line trying to handing in my resume to get a day job. You know, that's the reality of this business. Is it's like, especially during, you know, what we're going through now. Even though, you know, I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I do and to find other avenues to make this work. But, you know, there's no guarantee within the world of art and music and acting and I don't know, modeling or art, painting, whatever you do. Yeah. You're fortunate to be able to do that. If you can do that and have a roof over your head and make your monthly nut doing that, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I appreciate it every day, because like I say, at any given moment, it can be like, okay, you know, it's like, no one comes up and taps you on the shoulder and goes, thank you for your time. That was great. Now you're done. You know, you kind of have to, you just have to kind of get used to the grind of it. Well, it's not really, grind is the wrong word. The hustle of it, I think, is hustle makes the grind sound fun. You know, it's like you got to kind of be working it. You know what I mean? And I as soon as the live concert door closed, the session and recording window and writing window flew wide open. It was like, okay, what are we doing? You know, what are we doing if we're not going to, if we can't play gigs? What else are we going to do? So. Yeah, so for me, it's like I make the best of it, regardless of whatever it is, and appreciate it for what it is.
Todd, I'm listening to you so far. I just love your attitude, man, because you truly appreciate the gift that you have, the gifts you've been given, the gift that you've done. I mean, obviously you created, it wasn't just a gift. I'm sure you worked at it, but I mean, it is the anti-job, you know, to be in a rock band. is
It
it's a
is,
treat, man, and you appreciate
Yeah.
that. That's really nice to hear. That's not like, oh, it's a grind. I have a grind, you know what I mean? Like you're doing what we all want to do, and good on you, brother. Seriously.
Well, I've kind of learned, honestly, I had jobs. I mean, I had to do things I didn't want to do, and I've always been aware that. I mean, I was very fortunate too that most of my coming up involves stories of like, moments of triumph that are always balanced by some sort of like smackdown by the universe, all kinds of like me and my brother standing on like ladders way up in the sky, painting around, a wall because we're trying to make rent, you know what I mean? As a car drives by with our single playing on the radio, and I'm like, what's wrong with this picture, dude? Like, what is, it's just the nature of any of this, is I can't imagine being, say, 19 or 23 and just being handed that $1 million check and all the girls love you. And I mean, it'd just be such a strange, it would be very, I understand why those people get so out of touch. You know what I mean? For me, it's always been sort of like, one step forward, two steps back, one step forward, two steps back. So you're moving forward, but it always comes with a sort of a check and balance kind of thing. And it might have been very frustrating at the time, but I'm very appreciative now of what that means. And it continues to be that way because you're staring down the barrel of 2020 being the busiest year ever. And it's going to be this and it's going to be that. And then all of a sudden you get the universe smackdown again of like, okay. Yeah, everybody batten down the hatches and figure it out. But, there's a great line in that Kiss song that I always, the rock song that they did that version of God Gave Rock and Roll to You, originally by Argent. But there's a great line in that song that says, it's never too late to work 9 to 5. And I always kind of like hear that line. I go, amen, brother. Like, I just know that, the industry in general, we know so many stories of like some guy from some sitcom that was really popular back in the 80s is now, out of work. It's a cruel, fickle business. And if I can keep doing this, in reality, I was just saying the other day, I've been doing some shows around Vegas with guys like Howard Leese from Heart. He's in his 60s. I'm not sure how old he is, but it's kind of like one of those kind of things where I look at that and I go, I remember being like 20 and playing with guys in their 30s and thinking like, wow, like 30 seems so old. You know what I mean? Like now I'm like looking at guys in their 60s and going like, yeah, I guess this is how this works. Like, I'm not going to just like suddenly stop and be handed a gold watch and thank you for your time. It's going to be like, no, yeah. You just keep doing this until you kind of physically can't anymore, or until the universe tells you you're not needed. Your phone isn't ringing, and that's the end of it.
So the Slash gig, would you consider that your main gig, like your priority?
It is. I mean, in that, when we first started doing it, which was 10 years ago now, 10 years this past April, initially it started as Slash's. He had a solo album out with a bunch of different singers like Lemmy and Iggy Pop and Kid Rock and Chris Cornell. Miles Kennedy, of course, was on it, and Fergie. And he just wanted to put together a band to go out and support some shows. And we were like, yeah, sure. I wasn't sure if it was just going to be a couple months of flying out on weekends playing, that'd be the end of it. But that was a year and a half. And then it was sort of like, we're going to do another one. We're going to do a record with this existing band. And I was like, okay. And then that was a year and a half, 2 years. And, it just kept, we did 3 of those. No, 2 of those. Well, we supported the solo album with 2 more band records, the Conspirators records, then Guns N' Roses reformed. So Miles Kennedy from Alter Bridge has always remained a member of Alter Bridge. So there was always sort of a ping-ponging between, the Slash thing would fire up and then it would go away, briefly, and then it would fire back up. So it's a priority in as much like there is a project kind of idea to it. It's a band, but it's a project kind of thing where, especially when the Guns N' Roses reunion kind of happened, which as his friend and as a fan of the band, I was like, well, you have to do that. Are you crazy? It's Guns N' Roses. You have to. It's like, it's a history of rock and roll moment to go do that. And you know, and I'm the kind of guy, I play guitar, I sing, I write my own music, I do stuff. So I've always kind of looked at any of those opportunities where that was happening, that I can do all these other things that I like to do. So, but again, yeah, it's a priority. I mean, we're quietly, hopefully, maybe going to try and do something eventually here. It's so funny because it's kind of like, it literally feels like beer league or something, where it's kind of like, you know, you get a text once in a while, like, hey, what are you doing? You want to get together? And yeah, sure. And it kind of slowly fires up into something. So, but it is sort of what, you know, it's sort of what put me on the map, sort of what you know, kind of took everything to the next level, I guess.
So when you're doing that gig, like, so obviously when it goes down, you have to find other things to do. So are you kind of proactively, you know, charting your time out? So, oh, okay, I've got maybe 2 more months of this, and you're setting stuff up. Is that how you're running your calendar to keep busy?
Oh, absolutely. I as soon as I came to Vegas, it was actually really eye-opening. A lot of my friends that work in Vegas, and Vegas is interesting because it's one of those places where when you walk into a casino, you don't really think about it until you're in there, that there's a guy playing acoustic guitar over here. There's a lounge band in that little pub there. There's a big showroom where there's some sort of, you know, a concert happening. So there's like multiple venues in every casino. So you realize that a lot of working musicians from all over the place have landed in a place like Vegas because they can work and raise a family and all the weird things like that I kind of avoided as far as getting a real job. You know, all the trappings of a real job, how they exist here, but guys are, instead of going with their lunch pail, they're bringing their guitar case and instead of a toolbox, you know what I mean? And so I found that to be real eye-opening. And I mean, a lot of the guys that they'd be like doing an afternoon gig here, and they got this evening thing over this other place, and then they're going to do a late night gig. So they'd be playing 2-3 times a day. And I still had this artist head of like, you know, no. We write songs and we play once a month, if at all, because we don't want to burn ourselves out. Because when you're an original act that way, the whole idea is, you know, you can't overdo it. So the audience is like, oh, we see those guys every week. Right. Here it's a lot more like, it's not really about that. So when Muscat and I put together this jam band, which was literally just like a fun Tuesday night thing in this really dodgy bar with a very questionable PA system and all that kind of stuff. But it was just kind of a fun night to kind of like all our musician friends in town, the Blue Man Group, Celine Dion's band, and we just get together and jam and have fun. And that slowly, this other vibe where we ended up in showrooms and very big high production rooms doing that very idea. And that's a lot of where George Lynch from Dawkins coming down, and Slim Jim Phantom from the Stray Cats is coming down, and all these guys are coming jam with us. But that sort of really opened up this part of my mind where I was like, if you don't sort of, I was just talking to Dave Ellefson from Megadeth about this not that long ago, because he's one of those guys. He's got a coffee company, and he's got a record company, and he's producing this record, and he's doing that. And you kind of go to yourself, but he said to me, like, something that I have not really put into words until hearing it from him, is you kind of have to almost say yes to everything because, and then just figured how to make it all work, you know. And I think that it's, and the big quote was, it's better to be double booked than not booked at all. Yeah. And which of course is stressful, and you kind of have to figure out, okay, well, now how do I make this work with this? So I try to find the balance between all that, because it's too, you know, because like I say, I appreciate being able to do what I do so much that when someone often calls and goes, do you want to do this? It's like, oh, sure, that sounds like fun. Do you want to do that? Sure, that I can't turn down that gig, you know, right. And all these kind of things. And you just try and make it all work. And like you said, if it's something like it looks like the next 2 months, or it's not even the next 2 months, because it's usually you're aware of your schedule pretty far in advance. So you think that 3 months from now, I have a 2-month window of nothing going on. Then you're like, okay, boom, I'm going to fill that with this or that or whatever else you got going on. And so the Slash gig, usually when it fires up, between the recording of an album till actually coming off the tour, is often almost 2 years worth of extended busyness. There's breaks in the middle of some of those areas, but usually the cycle is such that it kind of like, it keeps you busy enough. when the breaks come, I still like to take advantage of what I like to do with my songs and my stuff or projects that I have going on. And then, but usually at the tail end of that, it's sort of open-ended. It's the one thing about this business is that there's no guarantee just because you're off playing on Jimmy Fallon and this TV show and that TV show and playing it sold out, 30,000 festival doesn't mean you can't come off that thing and look at your bank account and go, okay, well, you could just watch it shrink if you don't kind of like, so you have to kind of like think of it in a journeyman sense of like, okay, well, now I have to, what's my income? Because it's all outgoing until you figure out what you're going to do next. And luckily I like to stay busy and I like to figure out what to do with my time. So,
well, you just nailed something I think very important, Todd. A lot of people don't realize, like, you're a small business guy.
Yeah.
Right? So everything that you do is, you're out there working for yourself, obviously. And maybe some gigs are better than others, but people don't realize that's essentially what musicians do.
It's cottage industry mentality. We really I have my own merch company. I have the guitars that we do with Prestige Guitars. So they're all, I hate to look at it, I really always kind of veer away from talking about revenue streams and, all these kind of grown-up conversation stuff, because it comes from love and passion and my love of music that I have a guitar company that I work with. I do this merch company that is predominantly built out of the Dammit name and all that kind of stuff. It all comes from the right place and it all kind of showed up organically, but it is all built out of love. And it is, I do a podcast thing that I do, and there, that has its own benefits and things to it. Again, started mostly out of love because I love talking about music. Why shouldn't I record like we're talking right now, talking about what I love is music. Wanting to talk for hours about the Kiss comic books behind you. That kind of stuff, yeah. And that's kind of you kind of have to, we call it hustle, and there's nothing wrong with hustling if you love doing what you do.
It's so strange though. Todd, do you find it's different now when you were, and I'm not sure, I'm guessing that we're all around the same age, but Sean and I talk about this a lot. He and I played together in our first bar band. And it was that was your band. You had your 5 guys, your 4 guys, or 6 guys, and you were inseparable. That's what you did. But now, fast forward 30 years or 35 years, whatever the hell it is, and it's different because you need to be in a number of different projects, and not just like you said, not just other musical bands, but the merchandising. We had the talk show like yourself, so you have to keep busy with a lot of different things just to keep, to make ends meet. Let's be honest,
Well, I think when the record industry shifted in that, when you look at the Rolling Stones or Aerosmith or Paul McCartney, those guys aren't touring for their health. As much as, those guys don't, it's not about they're going to go broke if they don't, but that's where they're in, that's where their windfall is coming from because you're not making it on record sales anymore. Where 20 years ago, maybe more. The 80s and 90s and earlier than that, the record industry was predominantly, you made records, you banked mostly on making money from record sales, and the touring was just basically you're promoting your record essentially, as much as, of course, there was an income to be made from being on the road, and there was the glory of just getting on stage and doing it. Where now it's, when you talk to the older guys, Steve Lukather from Toto, when I talk to him once in a while, I talk like I'm his friend, but, as a fan, I was kind of and he's saying, well, we're out here, he's out playing Ringo Starr's band and stuff like that. And he's he's got his toolbox and he's going to work, and it really is kind of like you say, it's like back in the day, you'd be in AC/DC, the end. You'd make records with AC/DC, you would tour with AC/DC, and that's it, or Aerosmith or whatever band it was. And now all of a sudden it's everybody has 2-3 projects, a solo thing. And I'm the kind of guy I really embraced once I came to the States, because most people know me as the lead vocalist of the Age of Electric in Canada. And when I came to the States, when I was a kid, I started on bass. I started as a bass player. Me and my friends put a band together as a 3-piece band. I played bass and sang. I'd love to say it was like Geddy Lee, but that would be an insult to Geddy Lee. You know, I definitely wanted to be Sting or something. But, you know, and then it wasn't until I put the Age of Electric together where my little brother was starting to play bass. And I said, well, okay, I'll move over to rhythm guitar and singing, you know. So then a lot of people were so surprised when I moved over to bass, but it was kind of like, I really started to embrace that idea of like we're talking about, the idea of there's 365 days in the year. And if the cool thing about being in a place like Vegas or say Nashville or wherever you are, where there's music around you, Austin, Texas is like that. If Wednesday night you're sitting there or, you know, whatever, and someone says, hey, you want to come down and fill in for our guitar player? He's got the flu. Hell yeah. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, do you want to come down and sing? Do you want to come down and play bass? Do you want to come down and play guitar? I sort of embraced the ability to do all of it. You know what I mean? I kind of like, and I really, because I love music so much, none of it was kind of like, oh, I guess I got to play bass tonight. You know, it was kind of oh, that'll be fun, you know? And then the Slash gig presented itself as like, look, we're looking for a bass player. And I was like, well, hell yeah, I'd love to do that because I'm that kind of bass player too. I like to think I'm McCartney, but I'm more Sid Vicious, I suppose. But, you know, it's kind of like.
Two of my favorites, so it works out.
Yeah, well, mine too, yeah. Duff McKagan would say the same thing. We kind of live in that world of, you know, you play with a pick and you dig in and you play melodic lines, and that's kind of what we do. So I think that really helped me too, because it's sort of like, as a songwriter, as a session guy, as a side guy, whether it's bass, guitar, singing, I kind of wanted to be able to sort of go like, okay, well, there's nothing more fun than like sometimes when I was doing the Vegas thing, where this night I'm this, the next night I'm that, you know. So sometimes I'm doing a show and it's like I'm standing there with a microphone singing, like I'm like, and I used to do that back in the Age of Electric. And some nights I'm playing rhythm guitar with my friend's band, or some nights I'm playing bass doing this and that. And it really kind of scratches a whole lot of itches that I kind of have, you know. And then other nights, then I started releasing like solo albums that were predominantly acoustic guitar based. Like back in the 90s, I remember doing like a Kevin Kane do you remember the band The Grapes of Wrath?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Love that band.
Great band, yeah. Kevin was doing this, he said, it's a tribute night. We're doing a tribute to female artists. It's all guys singing female singers, like an acoustic thing. And I go, that sounds like fun. And I hung up the phone and I go, wait a second. I've never played an acoustic show in my life. You know, I've always stood on stage with a loud rock band. But I was really kind of like, okay, I'm going to try that. Just standing there with an acoustic guitar, playing, I think, Sheryl Crow. I don't even know what songs I took on, like a female artist, a Stevie Nicks, whatever I was doing. And it really awoke this thing in me, because just shortly after that, or right around that time, those Johnny Cash records came out. The last ones that he did were all predominantly just in a guitar, you know, in varying degrees of that kind of thing. And I always had a deep love for that sort of romantic idea of just grabbing the acoustic and just driving across the country playing shows. So I started doing that kind of stuff, and that really, you know, so I feel very fortunate that sometimes I'm thought of as a singer, sometimes a bass player, sometimes this, sometimes that. Come see me do an acoustic show by myself, you know, and it really, sometimes I think maybe it might make people kind of go, well, what the hell is this guy? Like, what does he do, you know? And I'm okay with the, I think, of just the answer being, I'm all of that, really. And I'm not embarrassed to say, like, I love doing all of that. I'm allowed to love pop music and punk rock and heavy metal, and you know, we do. It's just we generally, most of us are kind of like, we don't like just one kind of food. We go to multiple restaurants. That's what we do, you know.
You're a Swiss Army knife is what you are.
Canadian Army knife.
Yeah, I was gonna say Canadian.
It's
Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan.
Talk to us about Touque Talk, Todd. We've got a fella here who posts your stuff on our show all the time. And it's funny because last week, before we connected with Norma, I was just like, wow, we're either copying your guests, because you had Ron Keel on the show a little while back. Did you not?
Not on Touque Talk. No. I haven't seen.
But there was one guest here. Yeah, and he's in South Dakota or something now. But anyway, you had somebody on a week before we had on. It was just
Probably,
like,
yeah.
we're copying, and it was funny. Our buddy Eddie was kind of giving us a hard time about it. But talk to us about that show.
Well, Touque is that band I was saying. It's
Yeah.
myself and Fitz, and we started doing just out of a deep love and homage to Canadian music. We've since focused a lot more on writing our own music because that's what ends up happening. Most bands, even when you get together to jam, eventually someone goes, "Hey, I got this riff. Hey, let's put some words on that." Next thing you know, you got songs. So when all the shutdown happened, the lockdown, we just our producer guy said, why don't we just start basically doing the Touque thing, but turn it into this kind of idea. And it's very loose and very ramshackle, and the technology bites us in the ass every week. It's like, you just watch like, you just watch shit freeze, or the guy's camera. Like a lot of guys are like, they're not sure how to work their stuff, and we've had like, we try to focus mostly on the Canadian music that we grew up on, and so we convinced Sebastian Bach to come on as a Canadian.
Wow.
And he was like, so he didn't know anything about, he knows us from the Slash thing. So, but he just was so fascinated by the idea of talking about the Killer Dwarfs and Anvil and all the stuff he grew up on, And, so we've been, this week we have Jim Gilmore from Saga. It's always something like Learen we've had.
Yeah. That's who it was.
Kim Mitchell we've had, so it's been really fun. I mean, we did, like we said, we started off doing it as just kind of a laugh. Like I said, we literally just, what if we just played all Canadian music? That sounds crazy. Let's do that. And then all of a sudden you've got like, Kim Mitchell comes to your shows, or we did this one show in Vancouver, and Paul Dean from Loverboy was going to get up and play with us. And we all grew up loving Paul. Like we're all like, my first concert as a kid was Bryan Adams opening for Loverboy. That's how long ago it was, when Bryan Adams was like the up and coming kid. I was just a kid myself. And so we have massive love for the Loverboy camp. And so Paul is in his 70s. I'm not even sure how old Paul is.
Wow.
But we were told, like, Paul's going to get up and jam early night, because he's in his 70s and he wants to go home. I'm like, I don't blame him. So we go, okay, cool. So we get him up on stage somewhere early in the first quarter of the set. You know what I mean? He gets up and his Kid Is Hot Tonight. Anyway, so then, oh wow, that was cool. So he gets off stage, and we're like, that was awesome that he did that. And then like somewhere like at the 3/4 mark of the show, I'm playing, and the light kind of changed, and I go, is that Paul Dean, like literally standing right in front of me? So he was supposed to play early. He wanted to go home early, and he ended up just staying the entire night, just kind of like watching us play Harlequin and Kim Mitchell and Alden Noah and Toronto. Anything we could get our Canadian hands on. And we had a bunch of our friends get up and play too from the Odds, who played with Bryan Adams. That's him on like Summer '69 and all that kind of stuff. He's on that song. And so we just had a bunch of different guys get up and play. But Paul stayed the whole night, just stood there. And he talked to us after. I go, I thought you were supposed to go home at like 10 p.m. or something like that. He's like, he's just having much fun. It's like, so the whole nature of the show, the Touque Talk thing, was all the musical thing. Touque just became the talk version of the same thing, a deep love for Canadian music.
And you mentioned Pat Stewart. I got a Pat Stewart story. I was in a band, and we opened for, he was playing with a guy by the name of Glenn Stace.
Okay,
who was a songwriter. Anyway, Pat's cymbals didn't show up. And so he needed cymbals for a sound check. He gave me $200 to let me use the cymbal, or have to use my cymbal. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing. So
isn't he a pro? That's the most pro thing you could do. No, he's
super cool guy.
He's amazing. I mean, like, you have to stop and I'm the kind of guy that I never let go of that stuff, where I watched Pat Stewart play at the Philadelphia version of Live Aid back in 1980, when that was. We were kids, and you're like, so I never lose track of that, no matter how much, how normal it gets. I still kind of hold on to that kind of thing. Like, I know Pat like very well, but I still kind of always have that in my thing of like, that's Pat Stewart. He was playing behind Bryan Adams. at Live Aid in Philadelphia to a gazillion people, you know. So it's like, these are the kind of things that I retain. It's just part of the, I mean, some people are like that about sports, and I'm like that with music.
But it makes sense, though. I mean, I think you're going to be the best musician or the best overall artist stemming from being a super fan. Kind of like you said, you know, you can't help it. Like I said, you pay attention to all that stuff. It's your life. It's what it's all you know. You know, you didn't pay that much attention to school because you were drawing pictures of guitars. It's who you are, right? We get it. We're the same people.
That's exactly it. Like I always said, like, if they taught, you know, music, like, well, music, I mean, like rock and roll in school, I would have been A++++, because I was even to this day, I'm the kind of guy where I don't know a lot about like things I should know, but I know a lot about, you know, the Ramones or Kiss, the Zeppelin, or, you know, the Beatles. You know, it's just like, you can't help. It's just because it's not even like I have to sit down and study this. It's like, it just filters in and stays there because
Jack Black should have been a real teacher. Jack Black should have been a real teacher.
Now you're talking.
Yeah. But it's funny, some of that stuff you retain. I remember back in 1987, going to see The Cult at the Metro Center. A little band by the name of Roses opened for them. And I remember going, what the hell did I just see? They're up there. You're used to seeing like stacks of gear. They went up there with probably less gear than my band had. It was like, okay, then they came back 8 months later and opened for Iron Maiden. And it was just incredible. And those are the things that you retain when you're coming up and you're learning.
It's funny. You got to see that, huh? I didn't get to see any of that. Yeah.
I'll tell you. So they did the last tune. It was I remember it. They were doing Paradise City, and Axl says, "This is our last tune," and people start like clapping. And his exact words were, "You guys are going to regret this because when we come back, we're going to be the biggest band in the world." And that Sweet Child of Mine was released 2 weeks before they opened for Maiden, and it was something else.
They were the biggest band in the world. Yeah, I know.
They were.
Yeah. It's funny because my experience with Guns N' Roses has been so, you know, in a grassroots way, where it was sort of like when somebody first told me about Appetite for Destruction, it felt like a best kept secret at the time. There was no Sweet Child of Mine. It was sort of like, have you heard this? And it's like, what is it? I was never being suspicious of the name. Like, what are they? You know, and then like when I had it they always talk about how Nevermind and Nirvana shifted, you know, which it did. But I always say people forget that record, Appetite, it had almost as big of an effect in a different way, where there was a lot of, you know, big hair and a lot lighter. It's the day before the bands were a lot lighter, and there was a little bit more of a costume effect going on. And then all of a sudden Appetite came out, and it was like, there was some sort of like, I think that the only word I can really arrive at is sort of authenticity to it. Like the songs sounded scary. They sounded like they were written by just a bunch of ne'er-do-wells from the underworld of Hollywood, which is exactly what they were.
I was going to say that. It's pretty much what they were, I think,
yeah. And it was a legitimacy to it that really shifted, because there's been a lot of talk about Ed. Like we talk about Eddie Van Halen, you know, because when I was a kid, we all grew up on all those classic rock bands playing Les Pauls and Stratocasters and all that kind of stuff, and all the body guitars. And then Ed comes out, like with this is some sort of like the EVH dumbed down version, but the way, as a guitar nerd, speaking again, how he shifted the entire, not just the style of playing guitar, but no one even wanted to play, they all wanted to play something like that. They wanted a Strat type with a bar, and so all that, you just shifted that entire thing where every company had to have that kind of guitar. And then companies like Kramer and Hamer and Jackson and Sharp companies exploded, and Gibson went through a really tough time. Fender struggled too.
That's right.
And then then Slash comes along, and boom, the Les Paul has resurged and has remained that way for the past, well, pushing 4 years now. So it's been really interesting as a again, the impact of that music, again, that it's had. And considering when the reunion happened, there's always that takeaway factor of like, you know, even though Guns N' Roses existing without Duff or Slash, when Slash and Duff returned, it kind of exploded into a whole other mythic event level that, it's hard for me to really kind of, because I'm so close to it in my own way, even though I've never met Axl in my life, but I know Duff, I know Slash, and I know guys I know Steven, and I know no one knows Izzy. He's like the Loch Ness Monster or something. It's like no one ever sees him. Yes. And then, so it's kind of like to see it kind of like, and it's like exactly what I said to Slash when it first came up. I was kind of like that feeling of like, not that he ever asked for my opinion on it. What do you think, Todd? Should I do this? That was never the case. But I was like, of course. When he was explaining to me, I was like, of course. It's like if Led Zeppelin got back together or anything of that nature. It's sort of like this is in that realm of reality that you should reclaim your throne in that thing. Right. And be like, that's the guy from that thing that changed everything for a minute. You know what I mean? And continues to, really.
Yeah, I love listening to your stories too. It's so funny that you can actually, you're right there and you're talking to these people. But it's if he hadn't done that, it'd be like, can you imagine if John Lennon and Paul McCartney had get together just one more time and recorded one more song? How cool would have been, So they have to do that stuff. You have to do it, right? How could you not?
Which most assuredly would have happened. Honestly, I mean, that's a whole other nerd rabbit hole. But I really do believe that every now and then I have this real shadow grow across my heart, just imagining what we missed out on. The fact that they most assuredly would have done something. Like there would have been some sort of Live Aid or something like that, where they would have said, "Yeah, let's get together and play some tunes and raise some money." And we would have been like. We would have completely taken it for granted. It's like the Beatles are playing, But yeah, no, it's it's funny because when I talk about this stuff, because they did something related to that whole thing of being so close to it. Sometimes is there was supposed to be a Black Sabbath reunion tour, and Tony Iommi got sick, so. We were all on the road around this time, and we were doing these festival runs, and Ozzy was doing this thing to go in place of it, called Ozzy and Friends. So we were all on the same bill of this thing. So Slash would go out and sit in with Ozzy's band every night. It was Geezer Butler on bass from Black Sabbath, who's one of my all-time heroes. Mm-hmm. And I remember, like, we did a show in France at a thing called Hellfest, which is a huge festival. And I stood side stage. I later on was telling the story to a friend of mine, like, oh, dude, it was crazy. It's like, it's Ozzy. Geezer Butler's like right there. I'm on his side of the stage. Tommy Clufetos from Ozzy's band and a bunch of stuff, drums. But then Gus G gets out, who was playing guitar for him then. Zakk Wylde gets out, who hadn't really been in Ozzy's band at that time, but he did come back. And I just started telling the story, and then my friend kind of goes, well, Slash played too, right? I go, oh yeah, and Slash got out. It was sort of afterthought because Slash is the guy that I see on a daily basis. So it's kind of like, if I didn't play with Slash, I'd be like, dude, and then Slash came out. It was like, but I kind of, oh yeah, right. Yeah, of course Slash got out there and played too. And it was like, it was just like that kind of night. But that's how close we are to it. I mean, when Age of Electric first went down to Los Angeles for the very first time in '91, we were trying to do some showcase gigs. And Guns N' Roses was the biggest band on the planet. They hadn't released Use Your Illusions yet. Yeah. So we would hand out the Sunset Strip was still alive and well back then. Everybody thinks that January 1st, 1990, they just closed the entire thing down. Like, no, it lived on to about 93, 94. And we would go to the Rainbow every night because you would just hand out flyers. And then you go to the Rainbow. And those guys were there, Slash came and sat at our table one night. I always tell him the story. He never remembers it because he was always sort of elegantly wasted. He was like the mayor of Rainbow. And he would sit with us and talk, and I'd be like, And it was like, he was like in the biggest band on the planet. He wasn't like just some guy from some local Hollywood band, even though I really think those guys thought of themselves as just the local Hollywood band. And then, you know, that the weird course of life happens where you kind of circle back and end up playing with 15, 20 years later. And it's like, it's a surreal thing to be like, you know, to be that entwined in something. Because Appetite had a massive effect on me as a musician, as an artist. And it still does. You know, it's like,
as a songwriter, I'm sure. Yeah.
It continues to. It's the same with Bruce Kulick. I play, absolutely. And with Bruce Kulick from Kiss, I play with him a lot too. And the first time I saw Kiss back in '85, he was the guitar player for Kiss. And Kiss was a massive, you know, as a kid, it was like a huge deal to me. But when I finally got to see Kiss, it was the non-makeup version. Animalize was the record, and Bruce was the guitar player. So I'm like, however old I was, watching it in a hockey arena in Regina, Saskatchewan. And then a million years later, I play him, and I'm like, it's just this surreal. And that stuff's never really lost on me. You know, it gets lost on you in that you know Bruce as like a friend of yours, and you know, you just kind of know him. But every now and then I stop and I go, wow, you know, it's like, it's weird how life has this sort of like bizarre, otherworldly effect on things. And I try to hold on to that because it's too easy to become embittered with that kind of, you know, other sort of sense of things. It's like,
you can tell, man. You can absolutely tell. Like you know, you and I are showing our concept of this show was like the Barstools and Bandtalk. It would be like if you and I and Sean were sitting in a bar having a beer, talking, and this is what the hell we do. You know, this is all we kind of do. And so this has been. Listen, and we want to be aware of your time too. Like we want to take, you don't want to take much more of your time. But it's been so great talking to you because it's just, you're a real guy. You know what I mean? And we really appreciate all of your stories. I don't know, Sean. Like, what's your thoughts? Anything else you want to?
Well, I got one more question because I've been looking. Yeah, but I'm on your site here, Todd. So obviously, you know, your resume. If you're a bass player, Todd gets all the cool gigs as a bass player. So if you're a bass player, forget about it. You're not getting a cool gig. Is there one that would be on your list that you haven't done? If somebody said this is the gig that you get to do, who might it be?
It's funny because I used to make lists in my mind, like of bands that, like, especially because when you're down here and you start to know the other circles of acts, you know, like I just recently did a conversation thing that I recorded with Steve Stevens from Billy Idol's band, and I'm a massive fan of Steve. I think he's like one of the most innovative guitar players there ever was, and I was going to say underrated, but I really don't think people think of him as underrated. But for whatever reason, the Billy Idol band, I've always thought that'd be a really fun bass gig to do. I always thought, I love the songs. I think Billy's a legend.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird. That first one I thought of, Jane's Addiction is another band that I've always loved. Chris Chaney's an amazing bass player. Eric Avery has been always, I think, is one of the most underrated. When you listen to those Jane songs are built off of his bass riffs. And a lot of people, you know, you have to go back and listen to those records, but they all start with the bass.
You can cause feeling, absolutely.
Those are just the two that.
Yeah.
And absolutely, yeah. Like 3 Days or Mountain Song, they're all bass songs. And then it's funny, those are just the first two that came off the top of my head. I'm sure when I hang up, I'll be like, oh, I should have said this. Because, you know, it's like I remember we were doing all these we do the Kiss Cruise shows, and I play with Bruce, and we play nothing but non-makeup era Kiss. And people are all kind of like, you should be the new star child when Paul Stanley retires. to me, that's like saying, I don't know, like you should be Superman and you should fly, and like, you know, it's like it just doesn't make sense. You know, you're like, I can't even wrap my head around like what that means. I appreciate that somebody somewhere thinks that, and I go, that's amazing, but thank you. I don't know. I honestly, like, you know, when I really think about, like, you know, gun to my head, like choose something that you want to do, probably would say, you know, I probably would put most of my energy into just making my own music and just playing with people that I love and that kind of thing. When you talk about getting a gig and all that kind of stuff, it's like I always harass Debbie Harry, who I loosely know, that when Lee retires, I want to play bass for Blondie, you know, that kind of thing. It's kind of like all these like dream gigs that I grew up with that I'm kind of like, like to just stand there and play Heart of Glass or, Call Me or something like that would just be like, what is this happening? Like, I'd be like,
Yeah.
I always say that because I look at the guys in like Paul McCartney's band, Brian Ray, Rusty, and Abe. I look at those guys and I go, because it's kind of, I don't know those guys, but I know them to be like session musician guys around LA are, first of all, the best of the best, but also lucky enough to have gotten that call, and I just can't imagine, like, I would be like, they would have to kind of like pull me aside on a day-to-day basis if I was playing with Paul McCartney and being like, can you not smile so much? You look like a grinning idiot over there. I would just be like, oh my God, can you believe this is happening? But it's like, I don't know. It's funny because like even like just like as things are quietly opening up here in Vegas, my friends are just playing in small, quiet lounges around here with separated and socially distanced audiences, and there's a part of me that's just green with envy. It's kind of like, do I really want to go and play to a weird 50-person room that's awkwardly socially distanced on it? And I have to be honest with myself, yeah, I do want to play that.
Yeah.
I just desperately can't wait to get back on stage, and that's kind of the way I've maybe to my benefit or maybe to my detriment, I'm not sure, but I just love playing music so much that I don't really have that kind of thing that says, no, I should hold off and only present myself in the best possible light so people only ever see me on an arena stage so that my brain get cheapened somehow. I'm like, I don't care. I will play to 20 people, and I've done it. I've gone and sat in, played guitar with my friends, and they're playing to just a quiet group of people, and I'm like happy as a clam because I just love it. It's like,
Yeah.
So I honestly think that, like, whether I'm like 70 years old and playing at the the festivals of the universe or just playing a local pub, either way, I'm still going to get to play music. I'm okay. You know what I mean?
Right on. I will tell you this. You mentioned Bruce Touque, and you can give him the heads up that all the messages are from me because we got a bunch of people that want him on the show. So anyway.
I will.
Yeah, please do. That'd be awesome. Always loved the work that he did with those guys in the 80s. He just seems like a darn fine guy.
Yeah. So on Thursday, my little chat thing that I do, he's on my thing because we're supposed to be on the Kiss cruise like now.
Right.
The 4th year in a row is supposed to be happening right now, and it just obviously was postponed until next year. So
yeah, 2021 is going to look pretty good though, eh?
2021 is going to be a traffic jam of live music and
amen, brother.
Music.
Hey, the break man.
I honestly believe it's going to be like, I was saying to my friend today, I said, dude, if you're from Des Moines, Iowa or Halifax, I have a real feeling that it's going to be like, dude, there are 10 bands in town tonight that I want to see. Yeah. Or there's 10 shows coming up this week. I'm going to be out every night this week seeing bands. Because I think we all sort of like, I don't think really anybody takes it for granted, is that's the wrong way to look at it. But when no one expects the world to shut down the way it's shut down. So we all kind of go, and I've made the mistake of like, I'm really tired. I don't think I want to go see whether it was Tom Petty or Prince or Bowie or any of the people that we've lost.
Wow.
It's kind of like, our heroes aren't getting younger. And,
right.
It's like one day there's going to be the last Kiss show ever, and we're all going to go, damn, dude, I can't believe that happened.
For sure.
At least the last Kiss show with the lineup that we know. Who knows what could happen?
Yeah.
But
right.
And that's it's true of McCartney and the Stones, and the list goes on. It's eventually like I've seen Willie Nelson a handful of times, and I say to myself, I'm so happy I did, because these guys they're beyond senior citizen age. It's like, it doesn't last forever.
Well, who would have thought 6 months ago that there wouldn't be another Van Halen show? You know what I mean?
I know. It's staggering. It's staggering. All that kind of stuff it goes to show you that the beauty of it all, as heartbreaking as it all is that the music it lives on forever. So after, and I don't know about you guys, but it's been Van Halen wall to wall, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's not that abnormal from my regular life, but it is a lot more right now. And I think it's the one thing about music is that we're very fortunate to live in an era where all these artists I just mentioned at the press of a button, I can go down a Prince rabbit hole right now and never come out for weeks, or anybody really, And I when 2021 reopens, I really believe it's going to be, not only are the artists and the musicians, desperate to get out and play. I think everybody's desperate to get out and just, participate in the ceremony of a live concert. There's nothing like it,
No, for sure.
And that's our message has been all along, Todd, and I'm sure you shared the same thing on your show, and well, you live that dream. You got to support live entertainment and the arts. It's funny you mentioned that earlier, and I appreciate you saying that. Whether it be comedy, whether it be film, whether it be dancing, whether it be sculpture or painting, I'd be sad that I see your stormtrooper in the background. Can you imagine if there's no more Star Wars? I'd be, oh my God, right? It's like, it's what if?
There was a time I would have said there wouldn't be, but there'll be Star Wars long after we're gone.
Yeah.
There might be Kiss long after we're gone. I'm not sure, but these things, I was saying to somebody the other day, I don't think bands really ever break up. Once in a while, you'll think to yourself, I can't remember which band we were saying, they may never get back together again. But there are ones like
Motley Crue.
Well, yeah, exactly. But the fact that David Lee Roth came back to Van Halen, there was a period where we were like, that's never going to happen, but the Guns N' Roses, the Eagles, they all get back together. And some bands, unfortunately, some, as people get old and they pass away, but I'm hoping that, we can make the most of this while we have it. I think that's the goal anyway.
Awesome. So I tell you, it's getting late, my man. I mean, I'm looking
for
at
you
Dave's
guys.
clock. Well, whatever. But I will say, I want to give your website a plug because I've been bouncing back and forth. It's really, really well done, really well laid out.
Well, that's nice to hear.
That guitar, I can so see Paul Stanley playing one of those.
Well, Paul is a gigantic influence in many ways for me. And I was saying to somebody not that long ago how my entire life is just one ongoing Paul Stanley impersonation, no matter where I am. It's just sort of like, it's his fault the guitar is so low. It's his fault I didn't become a doctor or a lawyer. That's Paul Stanley's fault.
Yeah.
I'll tell my mother to blame him.
Compensation for it.
Yeah. You know what? He's been an amazing. I would never say I know the guy, but he's been really good to me. And I always avoided in many cases meeting my heroes because I was so terrified of them being dicks or ruining sort of, or ruining your deep passion for what they do. But I've been very fortunate with Gene and Paul to meet them in very sort of like controlled, events, and sort of meeting them I would never say on the same level by any means, but meeting them as a musician and meeting them as somebody in the same business that they're in. You know what I mean? God knows they are surrounded by, well, I've done the Kiss cruise. I know they're surrounded by just, it's like Star Trek or something. A Kiss really, we all know, is like, my house is filled with Kiss nonsense. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just the nature of, well, there's guitars right here.
Yeah.
Simmons, Paul Stanley. Yeah. It's just what we do. Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you made the comment about your heroes not being dicks, because I actually say that quite a bit. And
it's the catchphrase.
Yeah, it is. But you've been. I tell you, I'm so impressed with this. Just a humble guy. I won't say who it is, but one person in my lifetime that was a dick, and it stuck with me, and it was just I kind of felt it was going to be that way, and then when it was just such a disappointment.
Well, there's a lot probably. You know what I mean? But again, like it's like they always say that about musicians or actors or whatever, but it's like, how many guys have you met in your life that were just a dick anyway? Like a guy, there's guys, some guy at the office or whatever, some guy, you're like, that guy's a dick. It's like, that's just the nature of what it is. So if that dick picked up a guitar and started writing songs, then he's just a dick who plays songs. And then, like, I know that, I don't know who, but maybe a Bob Dylan might be a standoffish cat that you might expect him to be mildly standoffish. And I probably would be surprised if he was like, hey, Todd, come on in and have a beer. I'd be like, I would expect him to actually be kind of like, hello, kind of quietly. And I guess because my expectations as a Canadian guy, just today I was saying, I grew up in a town where when you walk down the street, it was like, hey, how are you? Good morning. And And I remember the Age of Electric, we put the band together. We rehearsed in the small town I grew up in just because we thought, well, it'll be cheaper to rent a place to jam in this tiny town that I grew up in than it would be in Regina, the big city. And every morning we'd get up and go down to the local cafe, and it'd be like, good morning. And I remember the Regina guys looking at me going, do you know that guy? I go, no, but that's what you do in a small town. How are you?
Yeah.
Good morning. You know, and it sort of carries with you for the rest of your life. And I think a lot of people are suspicious of that kind of like, what's this guy's deal? Why is he saying hello to me? You know,
Yeah.
I'm just saying hello to you. Hello, how are you? It doesn't mean that like I say there, you know, like I said before, like guys like Phil and me, there's probably just so many people who will tell you, oh, Todd Kerns, he's a dick. I met him once and he said this or whatever, and you'd be like, oh, okay. It might have been the case. I don't know. I might have been tired. I don't know.
Well, you're going to have bad days. I mean, that's going to happen. But I
Yeah.
think at the end of it all, even when somebody's having a bad day, you can tell when they're a good person.
Sure.
And conversely, you can also tell when somebody's not a good person, and you just
true.
have to deal with that too, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
like I say, I feel very fortunate that my day-to-day life is largely sort of, you know, that doesn't exist in my world. And often I think maybe I just have that sort of personality that it's like, if that has come up, it just sort of ends up in that deleted file. You know, he's kind of like, I don't really know that guy, so I don't really feel like I need to know that guy.
Well, have you ever had an instance where you met somebody years ago, and I won't ask you to name names, obviously I would never do that, but where you met somebody years ago and they were that, and then you met them again and they're all buddy-buddy, and you're going, have you ever had that?
Sort of. I've actually witnessed stuff like that happening in real time, like where I've sat at a dinner table, you know, with a group of people, and somebody will be really kind of cold, and then quietly, as sort of like they become aware that you're somehow attached to something else, they kind of warm up right there and then.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a little suspicious of that, kind of like maybe they're just kind of not all that socially adept. Not all of us are, you know, kind of like, I'm actually I kind of consider myself relatively quiet in a day-to-day kind of thing. I'm not like going up. My dad is the kind of guy who will talk to the, you know, the guy comes to check the water main and he's like talking to him around the whole house. I'm like, leave the guy alone. I let the guy do his business, but you know, I see it happen all the time. And yeah, there are people that kind of like, oh, that guy used to be a real dick. Now he's like my best friend, but maybe he wasn't a dick. Maybe, you know, it's like anything else. You kind of, you know, you can't show up at every possible scenario and have the world just open its arms to you. You know what I mean? Yeah, I kind of expect that, you know, you kind of have to earn your way in, and I get that. You know, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
When we had Lee Aaron on the show, she had a great, her line was, be kind, be kind, be kind. That's what she said.
And she always was. She always was, yeah. Oh, I think you're getting a call.
No, my battery's dying.
Fair enough.
Todd, to be fair though, I mean, your attitude here, with us here tonight, it's just been infectious. Like you're a humble soul. You appreciate what you do, and you know what? I think you really represent the Canadian in the United States. It's just like you're a good guy with good work ethics, with, you know, strong upbringing. I'm sure, and it's a small Saskatchewan town, and you know, and you're just bringing it down to Las Vegas. You know, and that's awesome. And we're, you know, from this part of Canada, we're super proud of what you've done.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. It means I fooled you guys. It means
Yeah, we're just East Coasters. We're easily fooled, you know.
Yeah. It's like, I'll hang up on this and just go be a dick the rest of the day.
Yeah. Love it. Well, thanks so much.
Hey, honey,
really
look, those assholes, they didn't get it.
Yeah. Not at all. Not at all. Thank you so much for having me. I really can't wait to get up to that neck of the woods. It's unfortunately so rare that we get to go that far east. And the last time I was there, well, Nova Scotia with the Slash guys was as far as we made it. So
yep.
I'm hoping that we can. I'm hoping it happens sometime in 2021 or 2022. So we'll see what happens. But yeah,
right on, sir.
Absolutely. So hey, keep the home fires burning.
Yes, sir.
That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Todd. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, brother. You take care, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Peace out.
All right.
Oh, it's my line. Peace out.